A team that I think makes the playoffs, and I said this 2 weeks ago, and that's why I think when people start to understand the difference between sports takes and sports betting takes, it's two different conversations that you're having. And that's been something that I've been trying to pride myself on building out veterans minimum to be, because there's two different outlooks that you can look at it. 2 weeks ago, after the Green Bay Packers played the LA Rams on Monday Night Football, came on the show, and I was telling Alan, I think there's a roadmap for Green Bay to be able to make the playoffs. And I want to step further saying, I think there's a roadmap that they can make it to the Super Bowl. You look at the landscape of the NFC right now. What team do you trust? I don't trust any team. You know how I feel about Dallas year in, year out, right? Anytime it's a big moment, they lay an egg. Do you trust Tampa Bay? Maybe for that first game when they play the Cowboys. You guys know I got the first round bounce dance all tuned up for Dallas. I think that they lose again to Tampa Bay in the first round. So you have those two teams there. Do you trust Philly right now? Philly's been the best team all year, but Philly also is coming in hobbled, right? Jalen Hurts, who was getting a lot of heat for being a system quarterback and not being the reason why they win. I think him missing that game against both the Cowboys and the game that he missed yesterday against the Saints only improves his stock and his value. It shows you, like, dude, there's a reason why we were the best team in football until I went down. So I think that that really helps his case. But do you trust Philly? Like, Lane Johnson's hurt. They've missed some guys on defense. I'm a little concerned with that. Could we see Jalen Hurts in a big spot in the playoffs? We saw him last year, and he laid an egg. Granted, this is a completely different organization, completely different team. He has more weapons. A.J. Brown, even yesterday, balled out with that big touchdown. Do you trust Minnesota? I've been pro Minnesota all year. Even coming into the year, they were my pick to win the NFC North at plus 280. I thought that was a ridiculous line. I loved Justin Jefferson to be Offensive Player of the Year. He's the leading candidate right now. He's like minus 800. Gave him out at 16-1 at the beginning of the season. But no one trusts Minnesota. Dude, they have 12 wins and they have a negative point differential. That is rare because the games that they've lost look like the games that they lost yesterday, right? They got throttled by Philly, got embarrassed by Dallas at home. They were basically getting embarrassed by the Colts before something happened that has never happened in the history of the sport. And then you play Green Bay yesterday, and Green Bay was up 4 touchdowns the majority of the game. I don't even know what the game ended, but I know Green Bay at no point were they like, oh my God, Minnesota's going to come back. Do you trust the Giants in the playoffs? I don't. So you're looking at the landscape of the NFC, and I was having this conversation last week, and it was like, look, at the time that we were recording, the big game was against Miami. They had to go into Miami. I felt like they were going to win that game. They won that game. But at the time when we were having this conversation, the Packers were plus 600 to make the playoffs, 75-1 to win the NFC, 150-1 to win the Super Bowl. Fast forward 2 weeks later. Now the Packers this week, looking ahead, they are -5 favorites at home against Detroit. They are -280 to make the playoffs because they're in a winning you're in situation with Washington losing yesterday. So they're -280 to make the playoffs. They are 12-1 to win the NFC. Said 75-1 a couple weeks ago. And they're 25-1 to win the Super Bowl, 150-1 a couple weeks ago. So sports betting is all about trying to map out a potential path or a schedule like we did with the Packers there. And now you're looking at it, why would you bet the Packers to win the Super Bowl now when 2 weeks ago we gave them out at 150-1? Do I think they ultimately win the Super Bowl? No, but we're talking about like a value and holding that ticket. You'd be able to cash out this ticket now in some sports books as well. So that's the thing, like finding the spot. The Chargers are another team. If I wasn't financially invested in the Chargers from August, I'd probably be betting the Chargers now because they check all the boxes of a team that I love getting behind this time of year. They're getting their guys healthy. They just got Bosa back. Herbert's playing at a high level. The wide receivers are back. You see how different they look when they're over there. And they're 30-1 to win the Super Bowl. So that's the thing. You got to find these spots and these path to victories. You guys know how I feel. I don't like betting the favorite because over time, it's very rare that the actual chalk favorite is the one that goes and wins it, unless it's a World Cup, like we also mentioned a couple of weeks ago when that was happening. But now the Packers, this is why you sometimes have to look at schedules, look at paths to see like, yo, if they make it past Miami, and look, I'll be honest with you, after I made the bets that I made on the Packers to make the playoffs, Packers to win the NFC, Packers to win the Super Bowl, I moneylined the Dolphins in that game because I knew based on that schedule, they were going into Miami. If they didn't beat Miami, then they're out of the playoffs. So let me make some of that money back. But I was rooting to lose it because then exactly what happened. They closed as a 4-point favorite against Minnesota. They played that game at home. And now they got Detroit at home as well. So all signs are pointing to Green Bay getting in. I'm expecting them to get in. And look, that game just got flexed to Sunday Night Football because Detroit is also in a winning you're in scenario as well. But Rodgers at home, prime time for a chance to make the playoffs, for as wild and as wacky as this season was for him. Hell, the last like 3 seasons for Aaron Rodgers have been wacky despite winning back-to-back back-to-back NFL MVPs. I think Christian Watson has emerged. The running game has emerged. They got some guys back on defense. I'd be very cautious if I'm playing the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs. I think they get by Detroit. And then, look, they're going to play Minnesota in the first round after what they just did to Minnesota. And if you go back and you watch that game in week 1, like Christian Watson doesn't drop that pass, that's a tie game. And who knows how his season looks completely different because then Aaron Rodgers trusts him also. And he's not going through it with that big drop in week 1. So I think the Green Bay Packers are a team you definitely need to keep your eye on. And I think they will have a quarterback advantage over every single team that they'll play in the playoffs. If they play him in the wild card round, you're going to trust Kirk Cousins over Aaron Rodgers, Purdy over Aaron Rodgers. I think it's something that you definitely need to consider and put in your mind that the Green Bay Packers might be in the Super Bowl or at least in the NFC title game. So that's my rant on the Green Bay Packers.